WBUR Podcast, Boston.
This is Up Next. I'm Tiziana Deering. Governor Healey is wading into a battle between key industries in Massachusetts. She wants to crack down on non-compete agreements, which limit some workers' ability to leave a job and go work for a rival firm. Some top tech leaders want non-competes banned, but leaders in some other industries see them as essential. Peter Carroll and Bhamathi Viswanathan are intellectual property lawyers. Both teach at Suffolk Law. And they're here to help us understand all this and make it interesting. Good morning.
Good morning.
So, Peter, I'll start with you. These non-competes. A high-skilled worker has to agree, in some cases, to a non-compete contract when they start. And it says you've got to wait a certain period of time after quitting before you can go work for a competitor. Critics have said that they hurt innovation. The state passed a law to curb them in 2018. Tell us briefly how that law worked.
So the way the law works is that it says that you can only have non-compete agreements in certain contexts. One is that it can't be more than a year. And it essentially tried to limit but not eliminate non-compete agreements. And one of the issues that came up at the time was, should we just get rid of these things entirely? And ultimately, there was a lot of back and forth, and they decided we're going to try to restrict them but not eliminate them in the way that, for example, California has done to support its tech economy.
And then, Bhamathi, there was a technical piece of the restriction that has raised questions. Explain that piece.
So as Peter said, it's for a year or less. And then we say, okay, company, your side of the bargain is you got to give something back in return. We call that consideration in contract law. But basically what it is it's tit for tat, right? Usually it's around like a half year's salary, which for a very high level worker also enables them to find another job, let's say, if they're leaving or to tide themselves over. But we also put in this clause that said, or some other consideration. Consideration, again, is what you give someone when you want to get something. And we didn't say what that is. So could it be something incredibly small and kind of meaningless? That's the concern that workers have, where they say, well, you say that you're locking us up for a considerable period of time, but you're really not giving us much back in return.
And we'll come back to the legal issues with that in a minute. But Peter, we have splits in our industries between who says off with its head, time to be done, versus let's tweak what's already there.
Yeah, and for the most part, you see weird alignments in this space, right? You see venture capital generally lining up on the side of we don't want non-competes. And so they're viewed as limiting, as glue, as sticky, old-fashioned, these non-competes that keep you stuck in a place and you can't go where the money wants to flow. And so the idea is we want Massachusetts to be competitive and we want to have all this VC funding for our industries, and we got to get rid of non-competes to do that. On the other side of the ledger, though, there's a lot of companies in Massachusetts and outside of Massachusetts that say, no, we still want these things. And it's closely related to intellectual property, which is what Bhamathi and I teach. And this idea that we have a lot of proprietary information, we have trade secret information, and we can't have employees jumping from one place to another and taking that information with them. And that's why we need a long period, a year now in Massachusetts, before they can go to the new place. And there's a great term that's in the statute called garden leave. And, you think about it, you're just going to be working in your garden for a year. You can't go and take your know-how to the new business. And so you're going to be out in the garden and getting paid some fee.
And Bhamathi, give me a specific example of a type of Massachusetts company that's important to the economy here and wants to make sure that garden leave is a necessity if an employee leaves.
All right, think about how scientific research and innovation works. It takes years and years, and it's hard to do it. The startup costs of biotech are enormous, and you've put everything, all your eggs into this basket of creating the next innovative drug, right? The next COVID vaccine or the next cure for cancer or whatever it might be. Years and years of technical expertise, know-how, work, passing the FDA trials. And now one of your top scientists jumps ship and tomorrow starts a company.
I think one of the interesting things about it, too, is that this is, I think, the paradigmatic company that has trade secrets that we're thinking about, right? But how do these cases really play out? Well, the one right now in federal court in Boston involves Boston Beer, right? Which is the Sam Adams Brewery. Mm-hmm. And why is this playing out like it is? Well, because what they called brewery representatives, who I take to be sort of sales reps out in this case, Illinois, had these non-competes. And these folks were making a base pay, I think I saw in the complaint, of $48,000 a year. So these are sales reps making $48,000 a year, but Boston Beer had them signing a non-compete. And that non-compete said, well, you got to not work for a long period after your job. You can't go work for a competitor, and we're going to give you $3,000. That's a lot less than the 50% that's supposed to be in the statute. And I think that even though we think of non-competes very much as paradigmatically about biotech, and they certainly are, they also really hit a lot of just everyday jobs. And in fact, there was some research just a couple years ago in 2020, I think it was, that said 1 in 5 Americans has had a non-compete. 2 in 5 have had it in their lifetime, and 1 in 5 have them now. So there's a lot of folks bound by these.
So as I've looked at this question, and when I was sort of in the business side of the world even years ago, what struck me was two things. One, that this is a situation where reasonable people can actually disagree, right? You can have a principled argument either way and stand on some solid ground. And two, that in this moment, we are talking about tensions between two industries that are critical to Massachusetts' economic future. I mean, life sciences and biotech have been a key engine, and Governor Healey and Eric Paley, her head of economic development, are all in on artificial intelligence, which would be more on the innovation side. So what do you each watch for now as this continues to play out, whether it's ban, leave alone, or tighten on Beacon Hill? Peter.
Yeah, I think the real question I'm looking out for is Massachusetts going to ultimately follow the California path and ban completely? That seems to be where some folks want to take it. It would be an even bigger shift from what we already have. The real question and the real idea is, are we going to sort of push to finally eliminate so we can become more competitive, even though I think it's not clear whether there is a direct connection between competitiveness in the spaces Massachusetts wants to be competitive and getting rid of non-competes completely.
The question is also, what are we trying to do here? If what we're trying to do is build a really competitive tech industry up again in Massachusetts and make it really robust and strong, is this a necessary step? And I'm really skeptical about the fact that people are saying it is, but I'd like to know why they think it is.
Bhamathi Viswanathan is a visiting assistant professor at Suffolk Law. Peter Carroll is a professor of law at Suffolk University. Thanks to both of you.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.